And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day, another great week, in fact, in this greatest nation on God's green earth. And what makes it so great? It's great because the weekend is over. And this weekend saw 3 new wars started. Well, first of all is the war with Canada. What the puck, as they say. Trump started it, and Canada's Mark Carney, the prime minister up north, declared, "We are at war. We were attacked." Okay, we'll listen to that clip later. Second, an Iranian official says support for new economic sanctions would be an act of war. And the third act of war has to do with President Trump's war with weight. Doctors are warning publicly that Trump is entering into the danger zone.
I went through the danger zone. I went through the danger zone.
That's, of course, from the first Top Gun movie, which helped to make a superstar of Tom Cruise, of course. A song by Kenny Loggins back from 1986. Meanwhile, CNN reports that the U.S. and Canada are barreling toward a deeper trade war after last-ditch talks collapsed on Friday. President Trump imposed 50% tariffs on roughly $20 billion worth of Canadian goods on Saturday, and Canada is now preparing to retaliate with dollar-for-dollar tariffs starting September 8th. That raises the prospect of further escalation and higher prices for U.S. consumers. With the Iran war already driving up energy and transportation costs, businesses may have less room to absorb another hit. Some goods that could get more expensive include paper products. What is that? To honor the struggle of our revolutionary forefathers? The Stamp Act, which was one of the first British taxes that got very passionate opposition here in the American colonies, was a tax on anything on paper, basically. So the idea that we are going to have paper products now, raising the price of paper products because of the tariff war with Canada, and plywood and dairy staples like milk, cheese, and butter. And then the idea that trade talks collapsed, and David Frum, who is Canadian originally, he's a naturalized U.S. citizen, former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, has a piece, "How to Lose a Trade War. Trump's Bullying of Canada is Failing." U.S.-Canada trade talks collapsed this weekend. Punitive Trump tariffs will now go into effect. Canada will reciprocate with retaliatory tariffs of its own. The story may not be over. President Trump is notorious for issuing threats, then reversing them. Wars are on, off, on again, off again, then on a third time, but only as a little detour or excursion. Remember when President was describing our now 6-month, half a year war with Iran as an excursion? This is not an administration, writes David Frum, that thinks that even one move ahead, but without a supersized Trump taco, meaning Trump again chickens out, or Trump always chickens out, depending on whether you want to make the characteristic permanent. But without a supersized Trump TACO, chickening out, The U.S.-Canada impasse likely will not resolve soon. And then there is this, that on Friday, just going into the weekend, Judge Jeanette Vargas of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York struck down the Trump administration's ban on issuing visas to immigrants from 75 countries, finding that the policy violated federal immigration law because it discriminated on the basis of nationality, and it was beyond the authority of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. In a 61-page ruling, Judge Vargas laid out how U.S. officials were ordered to refuse visas to immigrants who were eligible and unlikely to become dependent on public benefits in violation of a statute that requires individualized assessments of applicants. The countries that were going to be banned from having their citizens receive visas in the United States, those countries included in the visa ban stretch across Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. And then there is more, and more that we're going to be hearing about later today. D-Day. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, is expected to provide details at a news conference today, after warning in an op-ed that an economic D-Day is coming for Iran, echoing President Donald Trump's earlier threats. Secretary of Treasury Bessent has promised the toughest sanctions in history as talks to end the 6-month war remain deadlocked and Iran continues disrupting shipping through the crucial Strait of Hormuz. But even with fresh economic pressure, experts say that unless the Trump administration uncovers fresh methods to choke off Tehran's revenue streams, Washington will once again face a regime long practiced in evading sanctions and finding new ways to generate income. Oh, yes, and then there is this. The Postal Service published a 95-page final rule that would bar the agency from delivering mail-in ballots to states that don't share voter data with the federal government, when voting is really a matter for state regulation and state supervision, not the federal government. But the Postal Service would insist on compliance with a Trump executive order, which he signed back in March. The rule will not take effect for the 2026 midterm election unless the Supreme Court rules in the administration's favor, which is unlikely. Oh, yes, and then there is a piece in the Washington Post today about this is about the Navy renaming the carrier. There's a great deal of speculation about President Trump's weight and his problems with, his general health. We will get to that and to more. Big piece in the Washington Post coming up on the Medved Show. And there's a great deal of conversation going on in the nation's capital and across the country concerning a big article that appeared this morning in the Washington Post under the headline, "Doctors Say Trump's Weight Poses a Significant Health Risk." I wonder how much longer those doctors are going to be in a privileged position in the Trump administration. The article by Dan Diamond reads that President Donald Trump has faced scrutiny for bruising on his hands, discoloration of some kind, swelling in his ankles, and apparent drowsiness, among other questions about his health. Some doctors say they're worried about another risk, the 23 pounds that Trump has gained since his last campaign for president. His last campaign for president, of course, was just back in 2004. It's not an ion ago, but meanwhile, in August 2023, when he was charged in Georgia in an election interference case, Trump's booking record listed his weight as 215 pounds. But he weighed 238 pounds, 23 pounds more, in May of this year, according to a medical report released by the White House that month, in May of 2026. That would make him about 1.6 pounds shy of being classified officially as obese, as he was in 2019 and 2020, given his reported height of 6'3". There's also controversy about that height figure, which President Trump has given out, but that's not the issue at the moment. The president has appeared heavier in photos, says the Washington Post, than he did during his campaign, and the administration said he gained 14 pounds between his most recent annual medical checkups. We know that obesity is a strong risk factor for numerous health issues, as well as premature disability and death, said Scott Kahan, who is the director for the National Center for Weight and Wellness and a George Washington University physician. Addressing obesity to protect the president's health should be a priority, similar to ensuring Secret Service protection for his life. In other words, they're equating the obesity, which President Trump is right at the edge of, to an assassin. Trump, they say, has demonstrated signs of healthy aging. His weekly White House schedule frequently includes intense periods of meetings, press events, and public remarks. He spends many weekends playing golf. His physicians have repeatedly said that they are impressed by his energy, his cognitive fitness, and other positive markers. More than 40% of adult Americans are obese, reports the Washington Post. And an additional 30% are overweight, that according to federal data. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and other senior officials have said that helping reduce Americans' weight should be a priority as part of their campaign to make America healthy again and help people live longer lives. The president has also repeatedly invoked weight, his own and others, in public remarks. It is a favorite taunt he uses against opponents, such as Governor J.B. Pritzker, the Democrat of Illinois, and his own former advisor and former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. I would never call anybody fat, Trump said in a speech at last month's White House Correspondents' Dinner, where he mocked the idea of Christie and Representative Jerry Nadler, he's leaving Congress, he's from New York. They were fighting over a cheesecake. I have my own problems, he said. Trump has sometimes quipped about his own appearance, saying he hasn't wanted to wear bulletproof vests because they could make him look fat. He has also jokingly defended his diet. Maybe junk food is good and the other food is no good, Trump said in the Oval Office in May. I know many, many people that all they do is watch their weight. They're this, they're that, and they kick the bucket. But here I am. I feel great. President Trump's sharpness, unmatched energy, relentless work ethic, please, and historic accessibility stand in stark contrast to what we saw during the last administration when Democrats and the legacy media intentionally covered up Joe Biden's serious mental and physical decline from the American people. That is a statement of a White House spokesperson named Davis Engel. And he went on to say, President Trump is the sharpest and most accessible American president in history, and who is working nonstop to solve problems and deliver on his promises. So, does the White House think that he will actually benefit in terms of public sympathy and appreciation from this conversation about his weight? Trump has said, by the way, he has never taken a GLP-1 drug. Trump's diet and weight have been scrutinized across his political career, with his love for McDonald's a staple. Pressed by interviewer Barbara Walters in 2015 on whether there was anything that his children would change about their father, dear old dad, Trump's children eventually conceded that they didn't like his diet. I want him to eat healthier, Ivanka Trump told Barbara Walters. And then also Trump discussed his weight in September 2016 on the Dr. Oz show. And Trump said later about that appearance, I went on his show and he determined that I should lose weight, the president said earlier this year, reflecting on his conversation on air with Oz. He said, I think you should lose weight. I said, I don't need you saying that in front of millions of people. You don't have to tell me that. Contrary to his goal, Trump grew heavier during his first term as president. Ronnie Jackson, his physician, said that Trump weighed 239 pounds, about 1 pound shy of being classified as obese under body mass index calculators. I think a reasonable goal over the next year or so is to lose 10 to 15 pounds, Dr. Jackson told reporters that month. We talked about diet and exercise a lot. He's more enthusiastic about the diet part than the exercise part, but we're going to do both. And what about that exercise against Canada? We'll get to that and more coming up on the Medved Show. And more breaking news. The Trump administration has announced a 50% tax. That's called a tariff on all cars, trucks, automotive parts, and steel imported from Canada. Every American is going to pay for the cost of this latest and ridiculous and irresponsible trade war against our closest neighbor and a nation that should be, as it has pretty much always been since the War of 1812, but Canada. And President Trump posted on Truth Social, Canada has been ripping off the United States of America for years. Now that includes the new the new U.S. and Mexico and Canada pact that was negotiated by Trump. Remember, that was part of his first term. Canada has been ripping off the United States of America for years. Their ridiculously high tariffs on our farmers and farm products has made the life impossible for those great American patriots, capital letter, and has long created a $60 billion deficit between our two countries. Not sustainable, and not anymore, all in caps. On January 1st, 2027, tariffs on all cars, trucks, both large and small, automotive parts, and steel will be increased to 50%, billed in the U.S., and there are zero tariffs. Canada will be treated like a state for no longer. On trade, And in other ways, also, they are among the worst nations in the world to deal with. They feel entitled, and yet we don't need Canada. Okay, they need us. Both countries need each other. We have an extremely long border. Can you imagine what it would mean if the border between Canada and the United States were heavily armed with border incidents between the two countries? We don't need Canada, President Trump enthuses. They need us. They do 95% of their business with the U.S., with us. The exact opposite. I'm not sure what that means. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. I think that what he's trying to say is they do 95% of their business with us, but we don't do 95% of our business with them because we do business elsewhere. And today, there was an interchange with a reporter talking about Mark Carney and the reaction of the Prime Minister of Canada to what is happening. And the reporter asked, why does it feel like today Mark Carney is going to war? Here's what the PM had to say. Clip 9.
Do you plan on reviving certain measures eliminated as what previous concessions, the digital services tax, the U.S. streaming payments for CanCon, for example, those measures? And why does it feel like today Mark Carney is going to war? Trade war. The tone.
Because we were attacked. Like, you're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked. U.S. put 50%. We waited until the United States decided to actually implement these so-called 338 tariffs. That's fine. We've got the reserves. We got the resilience. We've got the plan. We've got the focus. We will respond. We're going to focus on what we can control. We're going to build.
Okay. And meanwhile, the largest province in Canada, the equivalent of a state, is Ontario. That's where Toronto is. And the premier of Ontario province, the equivalent of a governor here, is named Doug Ford. And he has some harsh words dealing with President Trump's personality, which is inextricably tied up with what's going on with this trade war, unnecessary and misguided. This is Ontario Premier Doug Ford, clip 8.
President Trump, he can't be trusted. Simple as that. He changes the deal. He keeps moving the goalpost. You know, let me tell you about President Trump. President Trump is the type of person that would steal your lunch money the first day. He'd steal the toque off your head the second day, and the third day he'd steal your running shoes. He is not to be trusted whatsoever. We need to stay united.
I'm not sure he would choose the running shoes. I'm not sure he's that eager, and he's constitutionally prohibited from running again for president of the United States. A former vice president of the United States, Mike Pence, who has been extremely forceful in distancing himself from some of the excesses of the administration that he used to serve as Trump's first vice president. Here was Pence on tariffs on CNN, clip 7.
Look, we hear about the issue of affordability right now, and it is, I've taken a firm position since Liberation Day tariffs that fortunately the Supreme Court turned over. That American businesses and American consumers pay American tariffs. And I think the last thing we need right now, as our economy is getting back on its feet, is a trade war with Canada. But yeah, my hope is I was in on all the negotiations for the USMCA. Mm-hmm. I know the tough line President Trump draws. It usually is accompanied with short-term action and hot rhetoric. We're getting the same from the Canadians. But my hope is, for the sake of American families and for the sake of the American economy, that what we're looking at here is negotiation and not confrontation in a trade war. And that's how I would advise the president: drive a hard bargain, but let's pursue free trade with free nations, most especially our trading partners to the north.
Okay, a very important and solid advice from Mike Pence. There's also this from Steve Forbes on Fox News, which has generally been supportive of Trump's trade policies. Not so much now. This is clip 6.
That said, Canada now planning retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. Steve, are we headed for economic war with Canada?
Let us hope not, because both countries are very dependent on that trade. And the fact of the matter is, in terms of the trade deficit, that comes just from heavy oil, crude, that we export from Canada for our refineries. They can't use any other kind of crude. And so when you take out that critical crude, we actually have a surplus with Canada for those who take trade deficits and surpluses so seriously. So I think they're going to find a way to tamp this thing down. But these threats just create uncertainty, which hurts economic growth and investment. So remember, tariff is another word for tax. And putting taxes on products means there's less economic activity, period. Republicans should know that.
Yeah, the Republicans should know that. Coming up, we'll be taking a listen to President Reagan. And I feel that it's very appropriate because last night, as a matter of fact, I was putting my granddaughters to sleep. And they said, "Tell us a story." I said, "You want to hear a story about Ronald Reagan?" And they said, "Yes." And I told them the whole story, and they were deeply inspired. We'll be inspired, too, with President Reagan. A message for MAGA coming up. And on the Michael Medved show, President Reagan, it's not just that he said things so well, he did, but he said things that need to be said and need to be repeated and, yes, need to be remembered. And he had a message for MAGA. That MAGA, of course, didn't really exist. Yes, it's true that Reagan, during his first campaign for the presidency, the first successful campaign in 1980, he did use that "Make America Great Again" slogan, but very different from MAGA, particularly regarding things like free trade. And Reagan's recognition that an emphasis on high tariffs and burdensome tariffs had to do with the folly of big government. The notion that somehow you are helping people when you expand the size of government, when the government determines how much you pay for given products. Here is President Reagan speaking on a possibility of trade war with our allies. Clip 4.
Our peaceful trading partners are not our enemies. They are our allies. We should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends, weakening our economy, our national security, and the entire free world, all while cynically waving the American flag. The expansion of the international economy is not a foreign invasion. It is an American triumph, one we worked hard to achieve, and something central to our vision of a peaceful and prosperous world of freedom. After the Second World War, America led the way to dismantle trade barriers and create a world trading system that set the stage for decades of unparalleled economic growth. Yes, back in 1776, our founding fathers believed that free trade was worth fighting for. And we can celebrate their victory, because today, trade is at the core of the alliance that secure the peace and guarantee our freedom. It is the source of our prosperity and the path to an even brighter future for America.
Oh, God bless him. doesn't get said much more clearly than that. Meanwhile, somebody also with more to say about the new trade war. The Prime Minister of the province of Ontario, Doug Ford, he stated in an Associated Press interview that former President Reagan would be, quote, disgusted and throwing up over President Donald Trump's escalating tariffs on Canada. Ford warned that Canada must prepare to retaliate by cutting off critical mineral and electricity exports to the U.S. But our transportation secretary, Sean Duffy, came on Fox News, and instead of preaching more understanding and cooperation between the U.S. and Canada, he let the Canadians have it rhetorically. This is the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, on Fox, clip 5.
Is there anything in your position as Secretary of Transportation that you're thinking about with respect to a tool in this sort of trade war back and forth?
We're great trading partners, right? But Canada gets the benefit of trading with the U.S. way more than the U.S. gets the benefit of trading with Canada. It's a country that doesn't have a military. It has a country that has a single-payer healthcare system that's failing. They have record-high euthanasia rates. And so to think that they're going to go to war with Donald Trump and actually win that war with the U.S., I think it's foolish on their part.
Okay, it's also foolish to just lie. He said they don't have a military. Yes, Canada has its own professional military called, get this, the Canadian Armed Forces. That consists of 70,000 regular forces and 30,000 reserve personnel. And if you have spoken to people who have served with the United States in places like Afghanistan in particular, but also in Iraq recently, they will tell you about the cooperation with the very well-trained and capable Canadian Armed Services. This is the Royal Canadian Navy has about 8,400 regular sailors, 4,100 part-time reservists, and a fleet of roughly 33 commissioned warships, plus auxiliary and training vessels. And yes, Canada is a member of NATO. It is one of the original 12 founding countries that signed the North Atlantic Treaty on April 4th of 1949. I mean, the idea that they don't have an army and they don't have military traditions, it's as slanderous and it's wrong. Meanwhile, a representative in Congress, Jason Crow, is an Army combat veteran, and he rails against Pete Hegseth for campaigning in Iowa as the war in Iran drags on. He had this to say, Congressman Jason Crow.
Why should we be surprised that a grossly incompetent and corrupt TV personality with zero experience running a major national security agency, let alone our Department of Defense, is failing to do the job? There are 100+ other places around the world where Pete Hegseth needs to be, managing wars, managing conflicts, checking on the health and welfare of our troops instead of campaigning in Iowa. But none of us should be surprised because this man was actually hired to play the Department of Defense secretary on TV and not be one.
To play the Department of War secretary is what Pete Hegseth himself prefers. Meanwhile, he talk about there are 100 other things he could be talking about. There are about 100 other people out there who would be better qualified for the job of Secretary of Defense and the head of the Pentagon than Pete Hegseth. Chuck Todd, on his podcast, spoke about troops on the USS Lincoln and Pete Hegseth about trying to basically pretend there was no problem there with the morale or the treatment of those armed personnel.
All the money we spend, and we can't do a simple thing like keep our troops fed on the USS Lincoln and do proper resource reinforcements for our most important ships at sea, the two biggest carriers we got. Like, what the hell are we spending this money on? I have to tell you, I mean, I'd like to see some real audits here. And you've got leadership. I mean, I'm trying really hard to bite my tongue. I think Pete Hegseth is among the worst Americans we've ever had in leadership. Hard stop. I think this is a total, utter disgrace and disaster. And yet it's horrible for the rank and file. I can't believe what we're doing. And we're damaging an institution that is the last one
like
standing.
The gold standard.
The
right,
last
exactly.
one standing,
right.
and you're gutting it and embarrassing us.
Yeah.
I'm just sick of it.
Okay, and again, this is part of the reason that people need to pay attention, because if you're sick and feeling sick about something, you want to heal it. You want some kind of cure. And I'm not sure there is a single cure or a single race, and all of the races, and there are hundreds of them, of course, that are taking place coming up in less than 3 months now. It's November. And taking care of those races and taking care of the political questions about who is going to define policy. After 6 months of war, says a piece in The New Yorker, Trump is still losing to Iran. Is there an alternative to that? Well, there must be. And also, President Trump makes a flat-out lie about transgender surgery. We will get to that and more, all coming up in This Greatest Nation on God's green earth. We'll also be speaking to Ruben Navarrete about issues on immigration and law enforcement and more.